In this session of The Harmony of Religions, we will explore the Buddhistic Diaspora, tracing the movement from origins in the Vedic Reformation through the development of a separate tradition that spread across Asia and the West. We begin with foundational concepts like Dharma, duty, karma, the law of cause and effect, and moksha, liberation from samsara, the cycle of death and rebirth. We will follow the life of Siddhartha Gautama, from his miraculous birth and spiritual awakening to his teachings on the causes of suffering and the cure. We will then study the formation of Buddhist monasticism, the role of missionaries, and the development of the major branches, Theravāda, Mahāyāna, and Vajrayāna, with their ideals of perfection and compassion. Finally, we will examine expectations surrounding the future Buddha Maitreya, the adaptation of Buddhism by Theosophy, and modern relevance through interfaith dialogue, literature, the psychedelic counterculture, and modern therapeutic practices. Swami Vivekananda said, "Buddhism is historically the most important religion, historically, not philosophically, because it was the most tremendous religious movement that the world ever saw, the most gigantic spiritual wave ever to burst upon human society. There is no civilization on which its effect has not been felt in some way or other. The followers of Buddha were the most enthusiastic and very missionary in spirit. They were the first among the adherents of various religions not to remain content with the limited sphere of their mother church. They spread far and wide. The Vedanta philosophy is the foundation of Buddhism. The Vedanta has no quarrel with Buddhism. The idea of Vedanta is to harmonize all. Hinduism cannot live without Buddhism, nor Buddhism without Hinduism. Then realize what the separation has shown to us, that the Buddhists cannot stand without the brain and philosophy of the Brahmins, nor the Brahmin without the heart of the Buddhist. Let us then join the wonderful intellect of the Brahmins with the heart, the noble soul, the wonderful humanizing power of the great master." Ancient Indian society was organized into a hierarchical caste system, or varna, with four main classes: Brahmins, the priests; Kshatriyas, the warriors and governors; the Vaishyas, the merchants and skilled workers; and Shudras, laborers and servants. Beneath these were the Dalits, or untouchables, who were excluded from the caste system and relegated to menial roles. This rigid stratification determined not only social standing, but also access to spiritual knowledge, with the Brahmins holding exclusive control over sacred texts and ceremonies. In addition to the caste system, life was divided into ashramas, or stages: brahmacharya, the student; grahastha, the householder; vanaprastha, the retiree; and sannyasa, the renunciate. These stages outlined a spiritual progression tied to age and duty, and alongside this, the purusharthas, or goals of life: dharma, duty; artha, prosperity; kama, pleasure; and moksha, liberation. Together, these structures reflected a highly ordered worldview where spiritual growth was tightly interwoven with social obligations. However, this system also fostered exclusivity and strictness, often alienating those outside the upper castes. Buddhism emerged within this context as a Reformation movement. While deeply rooted in Vedic concepts like Dharma, duty, and karma, cause and effect, Siddhartha Gautama's teachings redefined liberation, moksha, as attainable through personal effort rather than ritualistic intercession by the priesthood. Rita refers to the cosmic rhythm of creation, preservation, and dissolution in an endless loop of perpetual motion. Everything in the apparent universe is interconnected and interdependent. Souls transmigrating through the cycle of death and rebirth are bound by the law of cause and effect and also the inherent limitations and constraints of the material world, which is only a visible quarter of reality. The remaining 3/4 is beyond the empirical senses and associated with the ultimate truth, the absolute, unchanging, and eternal existence, consciousness, bliss, which can be realized through spiritual practices that remove ignorance and confusion. Rita is not a set of rules or guidelines for human behavior, but the abstract principle of cosmic order. Dharma is the ethical and moral code that aligns humans with this cosmic order. Dharma guides individuals in fulfilling their roles and responsibilities in a way that is harmonious with Rita. Dharma means law, duty, or virtue. It refers to the various desirable actions or mandatory obligations that individuals have toward themselves, their families, society, and the cosmos. Some are duties and standards that are common to all individuals, regardless of their specific roles or situations. Others are duties and responsibilities that are special or specific to an individual's unique role, place in society, occupation, or circumstances. Svadharma is an individual's personal and unique path based on their inherent tendencies and intrinsic inclinations, their swabhava. Karma is derived from the root, which means to do or to make, to build or perform. When the word karma appears in the Vedas and the Upanishads, it has different meanings depending on context. For example, the word karma sometimes means any action, any word or thought or deed, either conscious or unconscious or subconscious. For example, all the work that is done by our cells and our organs in our automatic breathing and our blinking. The word karma could also mean ritual action, which is ceremonies and devotional practices performed as part of religious duty and spiritual worship. Sometimes the word karma refers to moral action, those ethical or charitable activities, and likewise erroneous behaviors or vices. Karma sometimes refers to the accumulated results of past actions and decisions that shape current circumstances and experiences. Sometimes it refers to future effects, positive and negative outcomes of current actions and decisions. Occasionally, it refers to the merit or demerit accumulated from good deeds and bad deeds that can be passed from lifetime to lifetime or transferred among people. For example, the responsibility that a guru takes for a disciple's karma. The basic idea is that actions have consequences, and individuals are responsible in this lifetime and the next for their actions and outcomes. Not all of the consequences of our actions are immediately apparent. Intentions and decisions are the seeds for future experiences and potential results. Our accumulated impression from past lives influence our present inclinations and current circumstances. Our karma is impacted by unintended and unwanted causes, and also affected by the behavior of others. Karma is not limited to physical action, but includes thoughts and words. Spiritual practices such as charitable gifts, acts of worship, and prayer purify the mind, which is habitually trained by various impressions, which become tendencies, which can lead to merit and growth. Swami Vivekananda says, if you take the character of any man, it really is but the aggregate of tendencies, the sum total of the bent of his mind. What we are every moment is determined by the sum total of these impressions on the mind. That is really what is meant by character. Each man's character is determined by the sum total of these impressions. Vedic cosmology describes an infinite series of cycles of creation, preservation, and destruction of the universe, known as the Kalpa. Each period is followed by emptiness and rest. This pattern is intricately connected to the idea of samsara, the process of death and rebirth, and the four yugas, or cosmic ages, which also influence the Rajavritti, the rise and fall of civilizations. While the universe goes through these cycles, sentient beings, including humans, undergo a parallel journey of suffering and rebirth in samsara. The actions or karma of an individual influence their future lives, and this transmigration through samsara continues until an individual achieves liberation, moksha, and escapes the cycle of death and rebirth. This concept of an endless loop for the experience of liberation from death and rebirth is further mapped in Buddhism into 31 levels in 3 spheres and 6 realms of existence, known as the Bhava Chakra, or the Wheel of Life. This depiction usually represents samsara and the hierarchy of states of existence shaped by karma. The Kamadhatu, or realm of desire, spans 11 levels dominated by sensual pleasures and cravings. These include all 6 realms. The hells, marked by intense suffering and torment. The Preta, the realm of hungry ghosts, defined by insatiable cravings. The animals, driven by instinct and limited awareness. The Manusya, humans with the potential for enlightenment. The Ashura, or titans, characterized by pride and jealousy. And the Devas, the gods, who dwell in heavenly realms of joy and freedom. Notably, the Tushita Loka within this realm of Devas was the home of the historical Buddha Siddhartha Gautama before his descent for the welfare of humanity, and it is the current home of the future Buddha Maitreya. Above the Kamadhatu lies the Rupadhatu, the realm of form, comprising 16 levels. Here, beings exist in transcendent mental states and enjoy refined pleasures, with higher realms occupied by devas of contemplative knowledge, including the Brahmaloka, the domain of the Creator. The highest sphere is the Arupadhatu, the realm of formlessness, consisting of 4 levels. This is the realm of pure consciousness and meditative absorption. The legend of the historical Buddha begins when the virtuous Queen Maya of Nepal was visited while she slept by 4 divine beings known as the guardians of the 4 directions. They lifted her from her palace bed and carried her to a lake in the center of the Himalayas, where they purified her body in the crystal clear waters, dressed her in a new garment, and adorned her with flowers. As she rested here, a great white elephant with majestic tusks and a lotus flower in its trunk descended from the heavens and circled Queen Maya 3 times before gently entering her right thigh. Thus, the Buddha entered her womb. After carrying the child for 10 lunar months, Queen Maya began a journey to her parental home, as was customary for childbirth. Along the way, she stopped at a lush and serene garden filled with blooming trees. As she admired the grove, she suddenly felt labor pains. Standing beneath one of the trees, she reached up and grasped a branch for support. In that moment, the Buddha was born from her right side, painless and radiant, without causing her any suffering. The newborn immediately took 7 steps, and with each step, a lotus flower bloomed beneath his feet. Stopping, he raised one hand and declared in a clear voice, "This is my last birth. I have come to free all beings from the bonds of suffering." Devas and celestial beings descended to pay homage, offering garlands and heavenly music, while flowers rained from the sky in celebration of this miraculous birth. 7 days later, Queen Maya passed away and ascended to the heaven of the 33 gods, leaving her child in the care of her sister and husband. After the miraculous birth, King Shuddhadana of Nepal summoned 108 priests to the palace for the newborn's naming ceremony. Among them, 7 sages made a prophecy. Siddhartha was destined to become either a Chakravartin, the lord of the world, ruling as a mighty and revered monarch, or a holy man who would guide humanity toward liberation from suffering. Determined to secure the first destiny for his son, King Shuddhadana enveloped Siddhartha in a life of unparalleled luxury. Raised by his aunt Mahaprajapati, Siddhartha was surrounded by opulence, exquisite food, rare toys, and a life carefully curated to shield him from the harsh realities of the world. By the time he was 16, Siddhartha married Yashodhara, with whom he would later have a son, Rahula, whose name means fetter, symbolizing the ties that bind one to worldly life. Despite this idyllic existence, Siddhartha grew restless. At age 29, he felt a deep discontent with palace life. One night, unable to calm his inner turmoil, he quietly left the palace with his servant, venturing into the streets and countryside in search of answers. As Siddhartha wandered beyond the palace walls, the blindness of his sheltered life was overcome with four sights. He saw a man writhing in pain, his body frail and weakened by sickness. Then he encountered an elderly man, bent with age, his steps hesitant and unsteady. Third, he saw a lifeless body being carried to a funeral pyre, which left him shaken. Finally, Siddhartha came upon a serene ascetic, clad in simple robes. Unlike the others, the ascetic radiated peace and joy, sparking a deep curiosity within Siddhartha, whose servant explained that the man had renounced worldly pleasures in search of liberation from suffering. Siddhartha returned to the palace, and his father, hoping to distract him from the troubling sights he had encountered, arranged a grand performance of dancing girls. However, their poses shocked the prince, and that night, unable to reconcile the suffering he had witnessed with the luxury of princely life, Siddhartha made a momentous decision. He kissed his sleeping wife Yashodhara and son Rahula goodbye, and he abandoned the palace to seek religious knowledge and the spiritual solution to the problems of the human condition. Siddhartha adopted severe ascetic practices under the assumption that mortification might lead to liberation. He undertook intense breathing exercises that gave him splitting headaches and pushed his body to the brink of collapse with extreme food restrictions. He was emaciated and his hair fell out. Yet these austerities failed to bring him closer to his goal. Siddhartha concluded, these austerities are not the way to enlightenment. He then committed to the middle path, a way of moderation that avoided both self-indulgence and extreme deprivation. Siddhartha's quest also brought him into contact with two meditation teachers. The first recognized Siddhartha's exceptional potential as he rapidly mastered their techniques and offered him joint leadership of his meditation group. The second offered to become Siddhartha's disciple. At the age of 35, Siddhartha sat beneath the bo tree, vowing not to rise until he attained enlightenment. In a deep meditative state, he gained extraordinary insights, the knowledge of his past lives, the mechanisms of samsara, the cycle of death and rebirth, and complete freedom from desire and ignorance. As dawn broke, Siddhartha transcended all worldly attachments. From that moment of illumination, or nirvana, he became the Buddha, the awakened one, whose teachings reveal a path for innumerable beings seeking liberation from suffering. After Siddhartha's enlightenment, he began to share his insights with others. His first followers, 5 ascetics, had once practiced with him in extreme austerities. Now they knelt before him in reverence as he began teaching the 4 noble truths, which explain the nature of suffering and the 8-fold path to end it. He also addressed the 5 hindrances that obstruct spiritual progress and outlined the 5 abstentions to cultivate ethical living. These lessons constitute practical Buddhism. His first sermon focused on the 4 noble truths. The first truth is that life is impermanent. Birth, sickness, old age, and death are inevitable aspects of the human condition. All that is born will eventually decay and die in the cycle of continuous change. This brings us to the second truth, suffering. which is not only physical pain, but also the psychological anguish caused by attachment, aversion, and our relentless craving for survival and pleasure. Our tendency to grasp at fleeting experiences and resist discomfort leads to dissatisfaction and frustration. The third truth reveals the nature of dependent origination. Our sense of self is a construction, a temporary assembly of 5 factors: form, sensation, perception, desire, and discernment. These elements arise together, interconnected, but none of them represent a permanent or independent self. This false identity keeps us trapped in ignorance, craving, and aversion. Finally, the fourth truth offers the remedy to suffering, the path to liberation, the noble eightfold path. This path is categorized into 3 essential practices: wisdom, virtue, and meditation. The first category, wisdom, involves right view and right intention. Right view is the knowledge of the apparitional world as it truly is, seeing things in their impermanent and interdependent nature, and realizing the suffering caused by our attachments. Right intention refers to the cultivation of sincerity and a commitment to the right aim, the pursuit of enlightenment and the cessation of suffering, freedom from selfish desires. The second category, virtue, involves ethical conduct. Right speech encourages care in our words, avoiding lies, harsh speech, and gossip. Right action emphasizes moral behavior in our actions, advocating for love and mercy, and following the middle way, avoiding both overindulgence and deprivation. Right prosperity teaches that we should live and work in a way that does not harm others. The third category, meditation, is about practicing mental discipline through right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. The Buddha identified 5 hindrances to meditation: sensual desire, ill will, lethargy, anxiety, and fear of commitment. Additionally, the Buddha outlined the 5 abstentions, ethical principles that support the practitioner's progress. These are refraining from killing, stealing, indulging in immoderate sense pleasures, lying, and intoxication. All actions that disturb the mind and hinder spiritual growth. Finally, 6 treasures are cultivated along the path to enlightenment: generosity, merit, patience, strength, insight, and knowledge. The Buddha spent the remaining 45 years of his life teaching innumerable living beings about the path to end suffering. At age 80, he ate something that was either spoiled or improperly cooked, and in his final moments following the food poisoning, he reminded his disciples, "I declare to you, decay is inherent in all forms. Practice diligently for clarity of mind and work out your own liberation." The Buddha assured his disciples, particularly his cousin Ananda, that there was no need for a successor to lead the Sangha, the Buddhist assembly. After his death, the Dharma should be the guide. He gave a code of conduct for monks and instructed each person to think for themselves when it came to matters of doctrine. They were to cross-reference ideas and teachings against the scriptures. The earliest model of Buddhist monasticism followed a pattern seen in Indian traditions, particularly that of the sannyasin, wandering renunciates who lived solitary lives in the forest, often known as bhikshus or beggars. These nomadic monks would come together during the rainy season in temporary settlements. The first Buddhist monks, including Siddhartha Gautama himself, adhered to this lifestyle. Over time, as monastic life became more established, the need for permanent retreats arose, along with more formal regulations and commitments. Novices took 36 vows. Fully ordained monks adhered to 253 vows, and nuns followed 364 vows. Rituals and ceremonies, including fasting, recitation of rules, and confessions, became integral to the monastic community, which was organized democratically, with frequent assemblies where all members had a voice. Monks were also deeply involved in social welfare, providing health care, education, and playing important roles in the economy and politics. The Buddha sent forth missionaries with the directive, "Go, monks, and wander for the good and welfare of the multitudes." The teachings of the Buddha spread far and wide. The reign of Ashoka the Great in the 3rd century BCE was a pivotal moment in Buddhist history. Initially a ruthless monarch, Ashoka converted to Buddhism after witnessing the horrors of war. He embraced Dharma, moral duty, as the guiding principle of his rule. Through his edicts, inscribed on rocks and pillars across his empire, Ashoka advocated ethical living, compassion, and nonviolence, shaping Buddhism as a religion of peace and universal welfare. Ashoka supported missionaries to neighboring regions in Central and Southeast Asia, and his vision of a Dharma-centered empire transformed Buddhism from a regional tradition into a global religious movement. There is evidence that missionaries at that time reached as far west as Greece, Syria, and Egypt, perhaps inspiring the monastic community of the therapeutic. More than 2 millennia later, Swami Vivekananda was sailing in the Mediterranean when he dreamt of an old bearded man who said, "I am one of that ancient order of therapeutic," which Swamiji later translated as sons of the Buddhist elders. The old man claimed that the ideals and teachings of the therapeutic was the origin of Christianity. Perhaps this is why Swamiji also said Buddhism was the foundation of the Catholic religion, and the Catholic Church came from Buddhism. Theravāda, the earliest branch of Buddhism, is based on a collection of scriptures known as the Tripitaka, or 3 baskets. This ancient compilation, preserved in the Pali language, consists of 3 main sections. The Vinaya Pitaka, or basket of discipline, contains detailed rules governing the Sangha, the monastic community, ensuring ethical conduct and harmonious living among the monks and nuns. The Sutta Pitaka, or basket of discourses, includes teachings directly attributed to the Buddha, offering guidance on meditation, ethics, and the path to enlightenment. It is the most widely studied and referenced portion of the Tripitaka. The third section, the Abhidhamma Pitaka, delves into Buddhist psychology and analyzes the nature of mind and phenomena in intricate detail. Early Theravāda evolved into various sub-schools. The Padgalavada used the concept of a person to explain karma and rebirth. The Sarvastivada asserted the simultaneous existence of all phenomena across past, present, and future. The Vajrayāna emphasized discerning ultimate truth from contextual truth through analysis. The Lokottaravada highlighted the Buddha and Dharma as transcendent, existing beyond ordinary human limitations. The Bodhisattva ideal of Mahāyāna is a significant shift in emphasis from the Arhat ideal central to Theravāda. While the Arhat seeks personal liberation, nirvana, through the cessation of suffering and the attainment of perfection, the Bodhisattva aspires not only to enlightenment, but also to the compassionate service of all sentient beings. Rather than focusing solely on personal liberation, the Bodhisattva ideal encourages practitioners to delay their own final release from the cycle of death and rebirth, Samsara, until all beings have been freed from suffering. The Bodhisattva vows reflect this altruistic commitment. I will liberate innumerable living beings. I will cure suffering arising from ignorance, hatred, and greed. I will learn all the paths to truth. I will fully embody the way of the Buddha. Mahāyāna, often called the Great Vehicle, emphasizes the universal potential for enlightenment. Nagarjuna used apophatic logic, reasoning through negation, to demonstrate that the perceived difference between samsara and nirvana arises from conceptual misunderstanding. The Yogacara school, or mind-only philosophy, posits that the world is a mental construct, existing as a representation shaped by the assumptions of the observer. It teaches the transcendence of the subject-object duality, guiding practitioners toward a direct experience of reality unclouded by conceptualization. The ideal of the Tathagata Garbha, or Buddha nature, asserts that all beings possess the inherent potential for enlightenment. This cataphatic monism highlights the fundamental purity and interdependence of all existence. The Huan school, based on the Flower Ornament Sutra, describes the stages of a bodhisattva's development, characterized by vows, practice, and selfless service, culminating in a direct realization of the unity between phenomena and noumenon, in a vision of the apparitional universe as a harmonious, interconnected web where each part reflects the whole. Pure Land Buddhism is a path to liberation based on devotion to Amitabha Buddha, who promises salvation to those who recite his name, Namo Amitabhaya Buddhaya, or Namo Amida Butsu. This practice ensures rebirth in a realm of bliss and ease, where practitioners can advance toward enlightenment free from the distractions and sufferings of the mundane world. Two other bodhisattvas are closely associated with the Pure Land teachings. Avalokiteshvara, or Kuan Yin, is the embodiment of compassion, who assists those who chant the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum, the jewel in the lotus. Manjushri is the embodiment of wisdom, who wields a flaming sword, symbolizing the cutting away of ignorance and illusion. Pure Land Buddhism includes the concept of the three bodies of the Buddha to explain different aspects of the Buddha's presence. The Nirmanakaya transformation body refers to the Buddha's earthly manifestations, guiding sentient beings directly. The Sambhogakaya enjoyment body represents the celestial visionary form accessible to advanced practitioners in meditative states. Finally, the Dharmakaya, Dharma body, is the ultimate intrinsic reality, transcending duality. Some traditions further identify the Dharmakaya with the Jnanakaya, gnosis body, or the form of knowledge. The Lotus Sutra is one of Mahāyāna's most revered texts and spotlights the Buddha's adaptability in teaching by skillful means, or upaya kushalya. Recognizing the diverse capacities and needs of sentient beings, the Buddha employs various methods, explanations, and similes to guide them toward liberation. As stated in the text, I have used countless skillful means to guide living beings and cause them to renounce their attachments. A notable illustration of upaya is the parable of the burning house. In this allegory, a father sees his children playing in a house engulfed in flames, oblivious to the danger. To lure them to safety, he promises them different toys, an ox cart, a deer cart, a goat cart. Once outside, the children are instead gifted a magnificent cart drawn by a white ox, symbolizing the superior teaching of the Lotus Sutra. This story shows how the Buddha adapts his teachings to the spiritual maturity of individuals, leading them to the goal of enlightenment. The Lotus Sutra also teaches the unity of all paths, asserting that all Buddhist teachings ultimately converge on the realization of Buddhahood. It emphasizes the infinite potential within every being, affirming that enlightenment is not reserved for a select few, but is attainable by all. Zen Buddhism, known as Chan in Chinese, emphasizes non-attachment and meditation, dhyana, over reliance on scriptures or intellectual analysis. Its teachings focus on seeking insight into one's true nature, transcending dualistic thought, and realizing enlightenment through mindfulness and disciplined practice. The Diamond Sutra, a key text in Zen, teaches the impermanence and illusory nature of conditioned phenomena. It advises practitioners to perceive the world as transient and dreamlike. All conditioned phenomena are like a dream, a mirage, a bubble, a shadow, like dew or a flash of lightning. Thus shall we perceive them. Zen traces its lineage to Bodhidharma, who meditated facing a wall for 9 years. His teachings highlight a special transmission outside the scriptures, focusing on direct experience and mental control as the path to the awakening of innate Buddha potential. Koans, or paradoxical questions are common in the Zen practice. For instance, what is your original face before your mother and father were born? This challenges conventional thinking and conceptual limitations. Zen masters sometimes use harsh corrections or startling actions to disrupt complacency, provoking sudden insight. Zen also extends beyond seated meditation to everyday activities like archery, the tea ceremony, or flower arrangement. These mindfulness practices cultivate enlightenment in the reverent experience of ordinary tasks. Vajrayāna, also known as the diamond or thunderbolt vehicle, is the third main branch of Buddhism. It adapts some of its practices from Shaivism and uses ceremonial rituals, visualization techniques, and symbolic acts to accelerate spiritual progress. Central to Vajrayāna practice is the relationship with a guru or lama. The practice also sometimes involves taboo violations and transgressions of societal norms to transcend perceptions of duality and foster enlightenment by breaking down ordinary distinctions between the sacred and the profane. Some Vajrayāna rites and their meanings are kept secret, accessible only to those who have been initiated into the tradition. The Vajrayāna scriptures also include a prophecy of the Kala Chakra, a future world of peace realized through the advent of a Buddhist savior from the mythical land of Shambhala. The 800 disciples of the Awakened One were shocked when Maitreya was declared as the future Buddha. According to the Lotus Sutra, Maitreya was a fame seeker in his past life, when he read many scriptures, yet gained little from the study and forgot nearly everything he learned. He was lazy and greedy, seeking glory yet full of doubt. Nevertheless, his numerous compassionate deeds earned merit. A wealthy patron of the Sangha, Vimalakirti, warns Maitreya not to deceive the gathered aspirants with false doctrines. He said, "So if you have been given a prophecy of enlightenment, then all living beings should likewise be given such a prophecy. Why? Because suchness knows no dualism or differentiation. If you, Maitreya, are able to attain perfect enlightenment, then all living beings should likewise be able to attain it." Until his descent at the end of the cycle as the chief of men, the future Buddha Maitreya lived in a perfect society and paradise of saintly hermits practicing seated meditation. Devotees sought to enter his heaven for a face-to-face encounter by chanting a mantra, or hope to prolong life or be reborn on earth during his mission, to hear him preaching the true word and witness his use of empire to unify the social order for a golden age of righteousness. Maitreya, the future Buddha, was adopted into the Theosophical movement by Helena P. Blavatsky. She wrote, "Maitreya is the secret name of the Kalki avatar of the Brahmins, the last Messiah who will come at the culmination of the great cycle. She founded the Theosophical Society as the vehicle to prepare the welcome for the torchbearer of truth, introduce Maitreya to the world, and guide humanity's next evolutionary step in transformation of consciousness. She wrote, "If the present attempt succeeds better than its predecessors, Earth will be a heaven in the 21st century." Henry Steele Olcott, co-founder of the Theosophical Society, was the first well-known American of European ancestry to formally convert to Buddhism and led efforts to revitalize the tradition in the Indian subcontinent and promote it to the West. He authored the Buddhist Catechism, seeking to present a modern, rational interpretation of Buddhism, and established schools dedicated to its study. Annie Besant, succeeding Blavatsky and Olcott's leadership of the Theosophical Society, promoted a coming world teacher who would inaugurate a new age of peace and spiritual unity. Besant predicted an immediate future of catastrophic changes, with swift communication enabling the emergence of a global Catholicity. She envisioned Crotona, a theosophical center in Hollywood, California, as the place where Maitreya's practical teachings would be the model for a golden age of 1,000 years. Krishnamurti, initially groomed for Maitreya's return, rejected this role. Alice Bailey, a member of the esoteric section of Theosophy, lived at Crotona before departing to found the Arcane School. She wrote, "The world teacher is that great being whom the Christian calls the Christ. He is also known in the Orient as the Bodhisattva and as the Lord Maitreya, and is the one looked for by the devout Mohammedan under the name of the Imam Mahdi." According to Bailey, Maitreya, the world teacher, as an avatar of synthesis, would not only transcend the boundaries of organized religions, but herald a new world order of unity, cooperation, and peace. Examples of modern missionaries of Buddhism included Anagarika Dharmapala, D.T. Suzuki, and Thich Nhat Hanh. Dharmapala was a Sri Lankan reformer who collaborated closely with the Theosophical Society founders, Henry Steele Olcott and Helena Blavatsky, in their efforts to revitalize Buddhism. He founded the Mahabodhi Society in 1891 to restore and protect the Buddhist heritage in India, and introduced Theravāda to Western audiences through speeches at events like the 1893 World Parliament of Religions. D.T. Suzuki was a Japanese scholar and also a member of the Theosophical Society. His writing in comparative religion and Zen Buddhism resonated with Western intellectuals and artists. Thich Nhat Hanh was an exiled Vietnamese monk and Nobel Peace Prize nominee who popularized mindfulness practice in an international movement. Interfaith dialogue has also been a vital platform for modern expressions of Buddhism. Thomas Merton, the American Catholic Trappist monk, who referred to himself as Rabbi Vedanta, explored the contemplative core of different traditions in conversation with Zen monks and the Dalai Lama. Alan Watts, an Episcopal priest and philosophical entertainer, was a member of both the Theosophical Society in London and the Vedanta Society in Los Angeles. He was a popularizer of Eastern spirituality and comparative religion in his books and on Pacifica Radio in San Francisco. The 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, praised The Voice of the Silence by Theosophist Helena P. Blavatsky, which has been described as Mahāyāna Buddhism. And he wrote in the centenary preface, "I believe that this book has strongly influenced many sincere seekers and aspirants to the wisdom and compassion of the Bodhisattva path." Literature has also been a means of popularizing Buddhism in the modern era. Sir Edwin Arnold, a British poet and scholar, introduced Buddhist philosophy to the West with The Light of Asia, an epic poem narrating the life and teachings of the Buddha. This work inspired global curiosity about Buddhism as a spiritual path. Hermann Hesse, a German-Swiss novelist, explored Buddhist themes of self-discovery and transcendence in Siddhartha, which portrays the spiritual journey of a young seeker toward enlightenment. Jack Kerouac, an iconic figure of the Beat generation, integrated Buddhist themes in his work, particularly in the Dharma bums, which idiosyncratically depicts Zen meditation, wilderness journeys as a means to spiritual awakening, and the embrace of impermanence. The novelist Aldous Huxley was also the co-founder of the Trabuco College of Prayer, which inspired the human potential movement. He wrote a minimum working hypothesis which outlined the end and purpose of human life, and a law to obey if that goal is to be reached. By law, he was referring to the Dharma. And in his book, The Doors of Perception, he documents his experiments with drugs to induce altered states of consciousness in an attempt to more clearly perceive the ultimate reality. The desire for an extraordinary view, transcending mundane awareness, was shared by many in the psychedelic counterculture. Allen Ginsberg, a leading figure of the Beat generation, expressed Buddhist themes of impermanence, non-attachment, and compassion in works like Howl and in his public persona. Timothy Leary, a Harvard psychologist and advocate of mind-altering drugs, adapted the Tibetan Book of the Dead with Ralph Metzner and Richard Alpert for the psychedelic experience, a guide for navigating altered states of consciousness as a death of false identity and symbolic rebirth. Richard Alpert, later known as Ram Dass, also included Buddhist teachings on mindfulness in Be Here Now. Buddhism influenced modern psychology. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, wrote, "The Bardo Thodol has been my constant companion, and to it I owe not only many stimulating ideas and discoveries, but also many fundamental insights." Jung argued that the Tibetan Book of the Dead conceptualized mental illnesses in the same way as contemporary psychology. He used mandalas, a Buddhist meditation device, in his practice and defined the goal of Zen as a mysterium ineffable. Aaron T. Beck, the father of cognitive behavioral therapy, engaged in public and private dialogues with the Dalai Lama, and he was intrigued by the Buddhist approach to suffering and its similarities to the scientific understanding of negative thought patterns and mental distortions. Jon Kabat-Zinn, the creator of mindfulness-based stress reduction, brought Buddhist mindfulness into clinical settings for a range of psychological and physical conditions. Sri Ramakrishna said, "What are the doctrines of Buddha?" He was not an atheist. He simply could not express his inner experiences in words. Do you know what Buddha means? It is to become one with Bodha, pure intelligence, by meditating on that which is of the nature of pure intelligence. It is to become pure intelligence itself. His disciple replied, "Yes, sir, there are three classes of Buddhas: Buddha, Arhat, and Bodhisattva." Sri Ramakrishna says, "This too is a sport of God himself, a new lila, or play of God. Find God. That is the only purpose of life. Be illumined."